It is a place built for speed, anonymity, and the predictable comfort of the mundane. A McDonald's restaurant off U.S. Route 1 in Alexandria, Virginia. A brightly lit outpost of American routine, serving a river of commuters flowing in and out of the nation's capital. Here, in the shadow of the Pentagon, amidst the constant hum of government workers, military personnel, and defense contractors, the only secrets are supposed to be in the special sauce. But on the afternoon of November 9, 1978, this temple of the ordinary became the stage for a silent, high-stakes confrontation, a moment where the hidden gears of a global conflict suddenly seized up in public view. The air inside is thick with the smell of fried potatoes and the low chatter of customers. A young woman, Patricia Martinez, is doing her job. She is pulling a full, heavy bag of refuse from a trash receptacle near the door. It is a task she has performed 1,000 times, a mindless, repetitive motion in the rhythm of a fast food shift. But this time is different. This time, as she turns to head toward the back, a voice cuts through the noise. It is not loud, not aggressive, but it carries a weight of insistence that makes her stop cold. "Excuse me." She turns. Standing before her is a man in his mid-40s, dressed in a dark, conservative suit that seems just a little too formal for the setting. His face is a neutral mask, but his eyes are locked onto the garbage bag in her hands. His gaze is not one of casual inquiry. It is one of intense, unnerving focus. He says calmly that he believes she has just thrown away his food. He explains with a practiced patience that he had left his bag on top of the bin for a moment and was coming back to retrieve it. Patricia, just 23 years old, finds herself at the center of a sudden, inexplicable vortex of tension. Everything in her training, in the logic of her job, tells her this is a simple misunderstanding. A customer is upset. The solution is simple. Apologize, offer a refund, remake the meal. But her instincts, honed by weeks of quiet observation, are screaming that this is not about a hamburger and fries. The man before her is not an aggrieved customer. He is an actor, playing a part, and he has just missed his cue. She keeps her own voice light, apologetic. She explains that the bag is already in the trash mixed with everything else. Health codes, she says, prevent her from pulling it back out. The excuse is plausible, standard procedure. But as she speaks, she feels the weight of his stare, the silent calculation happening behind his eyes. He is weighing his options. How much of a scene is this worth? How far can he push this without drawing the kind of attention he has spent a lifetime avoiding? He asks if she could just open the larger bag just so he can check. The request is polite, but the undertone is a command. For a split second, the fragile membrane between two worlds is about to tear. On one side is the America of cheeseburgers, milkshakes, and minimum wage jobs. On the other, the clandestine world of espionage, of dead drops and handlers, of secrets that could shift the balance of global power. Patricia stands directly on that line. What is in that bag? What secret does it hold that is worth this tense public negotiation? It is a question that has been building in her mind for weeks, born from a nagging feeling that something was fundamentally wrong in the clockwork routine of her restaurant. She has seen this man before. She has seen the strange, silent ritual he performs with another man, a ritual of exchanged bags that never involved a single word or a glance of recognition. She had dismissed it, then questioned it, then investigated it with a quiet courage that no one would have ever expected of her. And now, she holds the answer in her hands, mixed in with greasy wrappers and discarded napkins. This single, fraught moment in a Virginia McDonald's was not an accident. It was the catastrophic system failure of a major Soviet intelligence operation. It was the final, critical domino in a chain reaction started not by the CIA or the FBI, but by the observant eye of a young woman who simply refused to believe that what she was seeing was normal. This is the story of how the Cold War, a conflict defined by invisible tensions and the threat of global annihilation, came crashing into the most public and unassuming of spaces. It is a story that proves a central and often forgotten thesis of history: that the grand, intricate machinery of power, built by nations and run by spies, is eternally vulnerable to the most unpredictable variable of all: the simple, focused attention of an ordinary person who decides that something is not right, and has the courage to find out why. The most sophisticated strategies of geopolitics, the most carefully guarded secrets, can be unraveled by a thread of human curiosity. The front line of that hidden war was not a fortified border or a secret bunker. On this day, it was the trash can at a suburban McDonald's, and the carefully constructed world of a master spy was about to be undone by the woman paid to empty it. The older man's jaw tightens. He holds her gaze for another second, a final, silent assessment of his opponent. He is a professional, trained in the art of risk management. He knows when to press an advantage and, more importantly, when to cut his losses. Creating a scene, forcing the issue, would violate the first and most sacred rule of his trade: do not draw attention. He gives a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He tells her it isn't necessary. Then he turns and walks out of the restaurant. His pace is faster now, the walk of a man whose carefully planned world has just been fractured. Patricia watches him go, her heart pounding in her chest. The confrontation is over. But the real story, the autopsy of a conspiracy, has only just begun. She turns and walks toward the back of the restaurant, carrying a garbage bag that holds a secret the Soviet Union would kill to protect, and one the United States government had no idea it had already lost. The popular myth of Cold War espionage is a fiction woven from glamour and steel. It is a world of tailored suits and high-speed chases, of ingenious gadgets delivered by a man named Q, of suave super spies who navigate gilded casinos and secret lairs with an unflappable confidence. It is a narrative of heroes and villains, of clear moral lines drawn between the free world and the iron fist of communism. This is the version sold to us in novels and on film, a thrilling but ultimately comforting illusion that the defense of a nation is in the hands of extraordinary men performing extraordinary deeds. The reality, as is so often the case, was something far quieter, far more patient, and infinitely more mundane. The real Cold War was not a sprint. It was a marathon of attrition, a long twilight struggle, as one president called it. And it was fought not primarily by commandos, but by clerks. It was a war of information, a relentless grinding effort to acquire the millions of tiny data points that, when assembled, could reveal an enemy's intentions and capabilities. The true soldiers in this war were not the dashing secret agents of fiction, but the anonymous men and women who could blend into the background, who could cultivate the trust of a low-level government employee, who could exploit a moment of financial desperation or ideological disillusionment. They were masters of the banal. Their greatest weapon was their ability to appear utterly, devastatingly ordinary. To understand how a Soviet spy ring could operate out of a McDonald's, we must first understand the world of 1978. America was a nation adrift, caught in a period of profound self-doubt. The ghosts of Vietnam and Watergate still haunted the halls of power. The economy was buckling under the weight of stagflation, a toxic combination of high unemployment and runaway inflation. Lines at the gas pump snaked for blocks, a stark symbol of the country's dependence on foreign powers. There was a pervasive sense of unease, a feeling that the American century was drawing to a close, a sentiment President Jimmy Carter would later describe as a crisis of confidence. Across the ocean, the Soviet Union, under the aging and intransigent leadership of Leonid Brezhnev, projected an image of strength and historical inevitability. While its own economy was rotting from within, its military might was at its zenith. Soviet influence was expanding across the globe, in Africa, in Latin America, in Afghanistan. The ideological struggle that had defined the post-war world felt, to many, Like a contest, the West was slowly losing. This was the geopolitical backdrop against which our story unfolds. An America anxious and distracted, and a Soviet intelligence apparatus, the KGB and its military counterpart, the GRU, that was disciplined, professional, and supremely confident. Their primary theater of operations was, naturally, the heart of their adversary, Washington, D.C. and its sprawling suburbs in Northern Virginia. This was the engine room of American power, a landscape of bland office parks and unassuming suburban homes that housed the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, and a constellation of private defense contractors who designed and built the nation's most advanced weaponry. This region held the highest concentration of security clearances, classified documents, and vulnerable human assets in the entire world. For Soviet intelligence, it was the richest hunting ground imaginable. The men and women sent to work these grounds were not typically the swaggering diplomats attached to the Soviet embassy, who were all known to the FBI and watched constantly. The most effective operatives were the illegals, deep cover agents who entered the United States under false identities, often from third countries, and spent years, even decades, building lives that were indistinguishable from those of their American neighbors. They ran small businesses, raised families, and joined the PTA. Their entire existence was a meticulously crafted lie, a legend designed to withstand all but the most intense scrutiny. Their job was not to steal documents themselves, but to identify, cultivate, and recruit Americans who could do it for them. This brings us to the operational antagonist of our story. It is not a single person, but a system. A methodology of espionage perfected over half a century. At its core was the principle of compartmentalization and security. The cardinal rule was that the asset, the American stealing the secrets, should never, if possible, have direct contact with their handler. A face-to-face meeting was a moment of extreme vulnerability, a chance for a hidden camera to capture two faces in the same frame, for a lip-reading expert to decipher a conversation, for a surveillance team to follow both parties home. To mitigate this risk, Soviet tradecraft relied on an elegant, centuries-old technique, the dead drop. A dead drop is a method for passing items between two individuals using a secret, prearranged location, thus avoiding the need for them to meet. It is espionage in its purest, most impersonal form. The location or dead letter box could be anything: a hollowed-out brick in a wall, a magnetic box attached to the underside of a bridge, a specific book on a library shelf. The key was that it had to be a place where an item could be left and retrieved without arousing suspicion. It required a location that was public enough to provide anonymity, but not so busy as to be under constant observation. It needed to be a place with a natural, logical reason for people to come and go. And in 1970s suburban America, what place was more logical, more anonymous, more ubiquitous than a McDonald's? It was a stroke of operational genius. It was a place of constant churn. No one lingered. No one paid attention to strangers. The act of carrying a brown paper bag in and out was the very definition of normal behavior. The trash receptacle itself was the perfect dead letter box, a place where one person could discard an item and another could retrieve it moments later, a seamless transfer hidden in the open. The routine was designed to be invisible, to melt into the background noise of American life. For over 2 years, it had worked perfectly. Dozens of times, the nation's most sensitive secrets had been passed from an American traitor to a Soviet spy over cold fries and leftover napkins, all under the cheerful gaze of Ronald McDonald. The system was flawless. It was foolproof. It had accounted for every contingency, every surveillance technique the FBI could possibly deploy. It had accounted for everything, except Patricia Martinez. For most people, a pattern is a form of comfort. It is the predictable rhythm of the sunrise, the familiar route to work, the clockwork precision of a shift change. We are creatures of habit, and we find solace in the repetition of the everyday. But for Patricia Martinez, A specific pattern that unfolded in her place of work began to feel less like comfort and more like a dissonant note in a familiar song. It was a small thing, a detail that 99 out of 100 people would have never registered or would have dismissed as a quirk. But Patricia noticed. It began on the afternoon of September 14th, 1978. An older man, mid-40s, suit and glasses, sat alone in a booth, eating slowly. 20 minutes later, a younger, heavier-set man entered, bought his own meal, and sat on the opposite side of the restaurant. They did not speak. They did not look at each other. They were two separate points of data in the bustling geometry of the lunch rush. Then came the anomaly. The younger man finished, gathered his trash into the iconic brown paper bag, and as he walked out, he did not put the bag in the trash receptacle. He placed it carefully on top of the flat lid. Seconds later, the older man rose, walked directly to the bin, picked up the bag, and left. It was odd. A moment of strangeness in a sea of routine. Patricia's mind, like anyone's, immediately sought a rational explanation. Perhaps they were friends, and one had forgotten something. Perhaps she had missed their initial greeting. She wiped down her tables and moved on. The incident dissolved into the background noise of the day, but the seed of curiosity had been planted. 3 weeks later, on October 5th, the seed sprouted. It happened again. The same 2 men. The same precise 20-minute interval. The same bizarre, silent exchange of a trash bag. This time, Patricia knew it was not a coincidence. This was not forgetfulness. This was a procedure, a deliberate, rehearsed set of actions designed to look like a chance occurrence. The 2 men were performing a piece of theater, and the entire restaurant was their unwitting audience. The act of not acknowledging each other was, in itself, a form of communication. It was a performance of separation, and it was too perfect. That evening, she mentioned it to her brother Michael, a security guard at a federal building. It was a tentative step, a desire for validation from someone she felt was part of that official, serious world. If anyone would understand, he would. His reaction was a microcosm of the societal pressure to maintain normalcy. He laughed. He dismissed it, mockingly suggesting she'd stumbled upon spies. The very word spies sounded absurd when spoken aloud, a melodramatic fantasy disconnected from the reality of their lives. The conversation moved on. The matter was dropped. This is a critical human moment, a juncture where most stories of this kind would end. The social cost of being wrong, of being seen as paranoid or foolish, is a powerful deterrent. Most of us would internalize the dismissal, doubt our own perceptions, and let the anomaly fade back into the background. But Patricia Martinez did not. Her brother's skepticism did not extinguish her curiosity. It refined it. She couldn't shake the feeling that the movements she had witnessed were too precise, too intentional. She made a quiet decision. If it happened again, she would not just watch. She would observe. The opportunity came on October 26th. This time, she was not alone. She had confided in a trusted co-worker, Lisa Harmon. Having an ally, a second pair of eyes, bolstered her resolve. It transformed her private suspicion into a shared investigation. They positioned themselves to get a clear view, going about their duties while keeping both men in their peripheral vision. The scene played out just as before. The older man arrived. The younger man followed 20 minutes later. But this time, they saw the crucial detail that elevated the situation from merely suspicious to deeply alarming. Just before the younger man stood to leave, as he folded his bag, he made a swift, subtle movement. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out something small, and slipped it inside the bag. The motion was quick, economical, almost invisible. But Patricia and Lisa saw it. This was the turning point. This was the irrefutable proof that the bag was not just trash. It was a container. It was a vessel for a secret transfer. The entire charade of buying and eating a meal was just camouflage. Elaborate cover for this one. Tiny, almost imperceptible action. The question that had been a vague curiosity now became a burning, urgent mystery. What was in that bag? Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia and Lisa moved from observation to action. They were no longer passive spectators. They were becoming protagonists in a story they still didn't understand. They devised a plan, a piece of amateur counterintelligence that was both brilliantly simple and incredibly risky. The next time the exchange occurred, Patricia would position herself near the trash bin, pretending to clean. The moment the younger man dropped the bag and left, before the older man could make his move, she would grab it herself and dispose of it. Then, in the safety of the back room, they would finally see what was inside. They were two ordinary working women planning to intercept a transfer between two unknown men engaged in a conspiracy. They had no idea who these men were. They could have been involved in organized crime, drug trafficking, or something far worse. The older man, the one who would be thwarted, could have been armed. He could have reacted with violence, but their conviction that they were witnessing something profoundly wrong overrode their fear. On November 9, 1978, the plan was set in motion. The older man arrived, taking his usual seat. 20 minutes later, the younger man walked in. Patricia moved to her station near the door, rag and spray bottle in hand, a performer in her own right. She wiped down surfaces, straightened napkin dispensers, her movements slow and natural, buying time. The younger man finished his meal, stood, and walked toward her. He placed the bag on the bin and exited. The bait was on the table. Patricia's heart hammered against her ribs. She counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. Just long enough for the man to be out the door. Then she acted. She grabbed the bag, but instead of just taking it, she shoved it down into the main receptacle, pulled the entire full garbage liner out, tied it off, and began walking to the back. It was a brilliant improvisation. By mixing the target bag with a full load of actual garbage, she had created the perfect excuse, and she would need it. Because from behind her, the calm, insistent voice of the older man cut through the air, and the real confrontation began. The confrontation at the trash can was a masterclass in psychological warfare, a duel fought with polite words and coiled tension. When the older man, the handler we will come to know only as Victor, confronted Patricia, he was not just trying to retrieve a bag. He was conducting a damage assessment in real time. Was this a random act by an overzealous employee? Or was it something more? Was he at this very moment standing in the crosshairs of an FBI surveillance operation? His calm demeanor was a mask, a piece of professional tradecraft designed to project normalcy while his mind raced through a dozen different contingency plans. Patricia's response, born of intuition and nerve, was the perfect countermove. By claiming she was just doing her job and citing health codes, she presented herself not as an adversary, but as a low-level bureaucrat, an obstacle of corporate policy. This was a character Victor understood. Bureaucracy was a force of nature, impersonal and unyielding. His decision to walk away was not a surrender. It was a calculated retreat. A professional intelligence officer knows that the mission's first priority is the security of the network. The loss of a single intelligence package, however valuable, was secondary to protecting the identity of the handler and the asset. In that moment, Victor made the choice to sacrifice the message to save the messengers. He vanished from the McDonald's, and with that act, he vanished from the entire operation. He had become a ghost. In the back storage room, amidst boxes of straws and frozen patties, Patricia and Lisa conducted their own forensic analysis. Their hands shaking, they tore open the garbage bag, sifting through the day's refuse until they found their prize. Inside the brown paper McDonald's bag, the truth was waiting. It was not drugs or money. It was 2 small photographs, the kind of mundane prints you would get back from a photomat. But the images they depicted were anything but mundane. They showed pages of typed documents, dense with technical data, schematics, and columns of figures. In the corners were the unmistakable stamps and markings of official government classification. What Patricia and Lisa were holding was a snapshot of America's deepest secrets. The FBI would later confirm their suspicions. The documents were genuine, originating from within the Department of Defense. They contained technical specifications for America's satellite reconnaissance systems. In 1978, these satellites were the crown jewels of U.S. intelligence. They were the keyhole satellites, America's unblinking eyes in the sky, orbiting silently over the vast, closed territory of the Soviet Union. They allowed the Pentagon to count missile silos, monitor troop movements, and verify arms control treaties. They were the single most important tool America had for preventing a surprise nuclear attack. To give away their technical specifications, their capabilities, their limitations, their orbital mechanics, was to hand the Soviets a manual on how to blind their enemy. It was an act of treason of the highest order. The myth is that spies are caught by other, more brilliant spies in a complex game of cat and mouse. The reality, in this case, is that the entire multi-million-dollar counterintelligence apparatus of the Federal Bureau of Investigation was set in motion by a phone call from a McDonald's employee. The initial skepticism of the agent on duty quickly evaporated when Patricia described the photographs. What followed was the mobilization of the state. A task force was assembled, led by Special Agent Richard Kellerman, a seasoned veteran of the Cold War's back alleys. Kellerman immediately recognized the trade craft. The McDonald's was a dead drop site. The younger man was the asset, the source of the leak. The older man was the handler, a professional Soviet intelligence officer. The interception of the bag had created a catastrophic domino effect within the Soviet network. The first domino to fall was communication. Victor, having been potentially compromised, was forced to go to ground, severing all contact with his asset. The second domino was the asset himself. Without guidance, he was left adrift and his behavior began to change. When FBI surveillance was established at the McDonald's, they didn't have to wait long. On December 7th, the younger man appeared. But he was different. The agents observed a man who was visibly nervous, his eyes constantly scanning the restaurant, his movements jerky and uncertain. He was looking for his handler, for the familiar face that would restore order to his world. But Victor never arrived. The asset was alone, exposed. The FBI followed him. The surveillance led them to a modest apartment complex and to a name, David Allen Becker, a 38-year-old technical analyst for a defense contractor. A background check revealed the devastating truth. Becker held the exact security clearances needed to access the materials seen in the photographs. He was a mid-level, trusted employee, the perfect target for recruitment. On paper, he was unremarkable. In reality, he was a traitor. The final dominoes fell on the morning of December 23, 1978. An FBI team arrested Becker at dawn. The search of his apartment was a confirmation of his guilt. They found the tools of his trade, a 35mm camera, rolls of undeveloped film, handwritten notes filled with classified data, and an envelope stuffed with nearly $8,000 in cash, the price of his betrayal. Under interrogation, Becker's story provided the autopsy of the operation. He had been recruited 2.5 years earlier by the man he knew only as Victor. The recruitment was a textbook case. Victor had approached him in a bar, slowly building a friendship, probing for weaknesses. He found one in Becker's financial struggles. The pitch was classic Soviet methodology. First, an appeal to ideology, framing the act as a noble blow against a secretive government. Then, when that failed, a straightforward appeal to greed. Becker admitted he did it for the money. He laid out the entire system for the FBI. The signaling method using a piece of red tape on a mailbox, the chalk marks on a utility pole, and the foolproof dead drop at the McDonald's. His confession was a complete victory for the FBI, but also a source of profound frustration. He could provide a physical description of Victor, but no name, no address, no tangible information that could lead to his identity. Victor had maintained perfect operational security. He was a ghost in the machine, and now he was gone. The ripple effect of Patricia's actions had exposed and neutralized the asset, but the handler, the more valuable piece on the chessboard, had slipped through their fingers. The spy ring was broken, but its architect remained at large, a phantom who had orchestrated a major breach of national security and then simply walked away. In the cold, gray dawn of January 1979, the Federal Bureau of Investigation attempted to resurrect a ghost. Using their captured asset, David Becker, as bait, they staged one final, elaborate piece of theater at the Alexandria McDonald's. The plan was to reset the board, to replay the scene that had been so successful for 2 years. Under the watchful eyes of hidden agents, Becker placed a bag containing dummy documents on top of the trash bin, a carefully crafted signal to a man who was no longer listening. The agents waited. Minutes stretched into an eternity of silence. Customers came and went, oblivious to the invisible drama unfolding around them. The bag sat untouched, a monument to a failed operation. Victor, the man they were hunting, was a true professional. He knew the site was blown, the network compromised. He was never coming back. The failure to capture Victor is, in itself, a crucial part of this story's legacy. It underscores the frustrating asymmetry of counterintelligence. You can catch the soldier, but the general often escapes to fight another day. For every asset like Becker, who is identified and prosecuted, there is a handler like Victor who melts back into the shadows, his identity a mystery, his skills ready to be deployed against a new target. He remains a blank file in the FBI's archives, a testament to the discipline and effectiveness of the Soviet illegals program. We will never know his real name or what other secrets he managed to steal for Moscow. David Allen Becker, on the other hand, faced the full public weight of American justice. He pleaded guilty to espionage. In court, his defense painted him as a victim, a desperate man manipulated by a sophisticated foreign agent. The prosecution painted him as a greedy traitor who sold his country's security for bundles of cash. The judge, weighing his cooperation against the damage he had caused, sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison. He would serve 11 and a half, released on parole in November of 1990, just as the Berlin Wall was being dismantled and the Cold War empire he had served was collapsing into dust. His betrayal had ultimately been in service of a lost cause. The McDonald's itself, the unwitting stage for this Cold War drama, remained open for another 2 decades, its place in history unknown to the thousands who passed through its doors. It was eventually torn down, replaced by another anonymous building. The physical evidence of the story is gone, but its lesson remains, more relevant today than ever. The universal lesson of the McDonald's spy ring is about the profound power of situational awareness. Patricia Martinez was not a trained spy hunter. She possessed no special technology or classified intelligence. Her only weapon was her attention. In an age of increasing distraction, where we are encouraged to tune out the world around us, her story is a powerful reminder that vigilance is not the same as paranoia. It is the simple act of recognizing a baseline, the normal rhythm of a place, and having the intellectual curiosity to question a deviation from that pattern. The entire Soviet operation was predicated on a single, arrogant assumption that no one would be paying close enough attention. They were wrong. The most secure systems are not brought down by overwhelming force, but by the discovery of a single, overlooked flaw. In this case, the flaw was an over-reliance on the apathy of the American public. Today, the battleground has shifted. The dead drop in a fast food restaurant feels like a relic from a bygone era. Espionage has not disappeared. It has metastasized. It has moved from the physical world to the digital one. The new victor is not a man in a suit, but a state-sponsored hacking collective operating from thousands of miles away. The new David Becker's not just a defense contractor with a camera, but anyone with a password. a corporate executive susceptible to a phishing email, a scientist lured by a fake job offer, a politician whose social media is compromised by a foreign influence operation. The secrets being stolen are no longer just satellite schematics, but corporate intellectual property, personal data, and the very integrity of our democratic processes. The methods are more sophisticated, the scale vastly larger. But the underlying principle is exactly the same. These modern operations still rely on hiding in plain sight, on exploiting human weakness, and on the fundamental assumption that in the blizzard of digital information, no one will notice the anomalous pattern, the dissonant note. The question for our time is, who are the Patricia Martinezes of the digital age? Is it the cybersecurity analyst who notices a strange data packet moving across a network? Is it the journalist who uncovers a coordinated disinformation campaign? Or is it the ordinary citizen who develops the critical thinking skills to recognize when they are being manipulated? The story of the McDonald's spy ring is more than just a quirky historical anecdote. It is a timeless parable about the clash between the monumental forces of history and the quiet resolve of the individual. It reminds us that security is not solely the responsibility of governments and intelligence agencies. It is a shared civic duty, a duty to pay attention, to question, and to act. Patricia Martinez and Lisa Harmon were never publicly honored. They received no medals, no official recognition for their role in uncovering a major espionage operation. They simply went back to their lives. But their story serves as a permanent, powerful testament to the fact that history is not just shaped in the halls of power, but also in the most unexpected of places, by the most unlikely of people. It is a reminder that in the long, twilight struggle between nations and ideologies, the most potent weapon can sometimes be a single human being who refuses to look away.